Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us Across the Fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. As the nation's first republic and eventually the 14th state, Vermont is rich with history and heritage. Today we're going to learn about a Vermont community that is celebrating its past with a brand new initiative. St. Albans is affectionately known as the Rail City. In recognition of the influential legacy of the railroad, the St. Albans Museum has just launched the Rail City History Project. And to learn more about the project, we've called on two guests. Alex Lenning is the executive director of the St. Albans Museum, and Don McFeeters is the co-president of the museum's board of directors. Thank you so much for coming in.
You're so glad to be here.
That's great. So Alex, let's start with you and tell us about the museum and what people can find there.
Sure. So the St. Albans Museum was founded in 1966 as the Historical Society. Originally, members met in each other's homes, and the museum opened in 1971. It's an old school building that was built in 1861. We have 8 different exhibits ranging from military and medical history to the railroad, obviously, women's history, local politics, and those sorts of things. So there's really a lot to see and do.
Wow, terrific. And what's the significance of the railroad, Don, to St. Albans and the region? Do most people know it's known as the Rail City?
If you go back a number of years ago, everybody would, but today, probably not so true. The railroad was an intricate part of the industry of St. Albans. It provided jobs. At one point, the railroad provided 1,700 jobs out of 3,000 for the railroad. You know, it was the main economic driver of St. Albans. We also had a spur that went up into the eastern part of Franklin County, which opened up. Franklin County Agriculture provided transportation for grain, fertilizer, and other things. It also provided a place for jobs with the Worthmore Feed Company, which is a major manufacturer of feed on the railroad. Without the railroad, those kinds of jobs would not have been there. So the railroad was a major economic driver of the region. It also affected the social activity in the community as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And engineers and all those people keeping those trains on the rails.
That's right.
So what do you want people to know, Alex, about the Rail City History Project?
So we're really proud of this new initiative and the fact that it is really multifaceted. So we received some restricted contributions to fund a renovation of the room. There's a railroad exhibit currently at the museum, and it's really grown into finding a way to tell this community story in a wider way. So there's an oral history component. We're currently conducting interviews with people who had maybe family members who worked for the railroad or were involved in the railroad. We're trying to capture those stories before they're lost to time, and really finding a way for the community to get involved through donating artifacts and other things. We're really proud that because of the funding and because of the community support, we're going to be able to tell this in a new and exciting way, utilizing AV and enhancing the room and renovating the space. It's a really exciting project for us.
Fantastic. And Don, the Central Vermont Railroad Company was at one point the 7th largest railroad in the country. They're all throughout New England and into Quebec, and even some steamships, I think.
That's right. It was a major enterprise and was considered the 7th largest railroad. It went from the Canadian border all the way south into southern New England, and then the steamship lease line was from Connecticut on into New York City. We also had connections over to Ogdensburg, New York, which then connected with the St. Lawrence River, which then would move produce and product into the Great Lakes and on to Duluth, Minnesota. So it opened up really the whole eastern part of the United States. And so it was a major piece of economic activity.
And in what time period are we talking? What was the heyday kind of?
So the railroad came to Vermont in the 1840s, but it's really the 1860s when the headquarters was established in St. Albans. Over the next 50 to 100 years is really the kind of key chronology for this.
Okay. And I also read that one of our former Vermont governors, Governor John Gregory Smith, also had a lot to do with the railroad and St. Albans, and the Smith family is very important to St. Albans, to the region, and to the railroad. Don, can you talk a little bit about the Smith family?
The Smith family came to St. Albans about 1800. They came there to farm. I think it was Samuel Smith and John Smith, who became one of the real leaders, was a son, and then the J. Gregory Smith that you speak of that became governor. Many members of the family were involved politically, economically. They also, beyond the railroad business, they were involved with as entrepreneurs. They were bankers. They were almost every intricate part of the town and Vermont. They were a very important part. There was 5 generations of Smiths that were involved at different stages. So it was a family that were what I call the movers and shakers of the town and of Vermont. Yeah. And J. Gregory Smith was the governor during the Civil War, and that has an intricate part related to the St. Albans raid, because he was the governor at the time. Wow. When the St. Albans raid took place.
Right. Goodness. And we're seeing those models that we're seeing, are those pieces in the museum?
So we are very proud of our railroad exhibit, and if you walk in, we sort of tell people it's like taking a step back in time. You sort of transport yourself into this ticket office, and you can see pieces from various engines, conductors' uniforms, as well as some really great model trains that volunteers have contributed over the years.
Fantastic. And this was City Hall. It's so stunning at that time. So many families throughout Franklin County have a connection to the railroad. So is the museum's work also about the social and economic impacts of the railroad?
It is. If you were to drive down Lake Street today past the headquarters building, you'd cross one railroad track. If you were to do it at the time period we're talking about, you would have crossed 23. So you can imagine, as Don mentioned, an economic driver. It was the largest employer. St. Albans is really known for its French, Canadian, and Irish heritage. There are 2 Catholic churches that one sort of identifies with each. And there was a time period sort of in the social history of St. Albans where you can sort of trace where different families were based on their ethnic background, whether they lived above or below the tracks. It really was sort of this dividing line in a lot of ways that separated the community but also united it as the driving force behind employment, transportation, and those sorts of things.
Oh, so you're looking at that as well at the museum?
Absolutely.
I think it's a very important piece of the story.
Sure.
And that's what we're trying to do, is to tell the story. It's to build on the social implications and the living arrangements that were in existence at the time, as well as the story of some specific things related to the railroad.
I mean, Don's right. It's not just about the engines themselves or the lines. It's, there was manufacturing in St. Albans. There were repair facilities. There were administrative facilities. So literally everything that you would need to make a train work or operate came out of St. Albans.
So it was a hub of really good employment, so people might come from other places, right?
Absolutely.
It wasn't just the railroad. It was there was a number of items around the railroad, businesses that provided jobs. I've mentioned Worthmore Feed as an example.
Dairy is another great example for sure.
Yeah. Right. So it really connected people as well as places to go to. So is this project going to connect with schools?
It is. We're really fortunate to have a strong relationship with the local educational community. So one way you're going to see this is through our Lake Lessons program, which is a STEM/cultural heritage workshop that we offer for local elementary and middle school students. And basically the point of Lake Lessons is to kind of combine this unique history, this maritime heritage of St. Albans Bay with watershed ecology and understanding our local environment. And of course a piece of that is technology and the railroad. So we work with several other local partners to offer these workshops for local students. Part of that conversation is going to be understanding sort of the environmental and transportation impact that the railroad had on St. Albans Bay and the lake to an extent. And then we're also going to be working with local libraries and local students to help conduct some of these interviews as part of our oral history project. So the museum, of course, is going to be inviting community members in, but we're also going to be reaching out Franklin and Grand Isle counties and beyond to work with students, to work with libraries and community members, and to invite them to help us capture and document these really important stories.
Well, fantastic. And you know, as part of that, it's also making sure that people bring you things and probably help with the money situation. So how you've received a lot of generous donations in many ways. Can you speak a little bit to that and what you're still looking for?
Sure. So of course we're still looking for support. What I'm really proud of is that this is a community curated project. And what do I mean by that? I mean that the display itself, the elements of the exhibit, the artifacts, the photos, ephemera, memorabilia, those things that come from community members. So we're asking people, if you have something in your attic, something in your family history, a story to share, a favorite memory, photo album, memorabilia related to the railroad, to bring that into the museum, have a conversation with us, help us document it, consider loaning or donating it to the exhibit. We're also looking for financial support to encourage renovations in the space, and then people who want to volunteer and just be a part of the project or the committee itself.
Huh. So interesting things. What is some of the most fun things that are there on display at this time, Don, around the railroad that you're most excited about?
I guess as I look at the railroad, it's you look at some of the engine. Jim Murphy, who's been the prime mover with the whole railroad project that we've had, brought in a headlight from off a engine, locomotive, right. And that provided a new piece this last summer, and so we're trying to bring new items into the play that we can use.
You never know what's in people's barns and attics.
That's right.
Right? And so you're looking for that, as well as, of course, the stories.
Right, and there's so many unexpected ways the railroad makes connections. Don talked about the fact that the CVR stretched from New York to the Great Lakes. There were connections to Western railroads. They actually at one time operated an airline from Boston to Bangor, Maine.
Wow. So if you're interested in this and helping out with the St. Albans Museum or this project, you go to www.stamuseum.org. I want to thank both of you for coming in and telling us about what's going on with Rail City, St. Albans.
Thanks for having us.
Come and visit.
Thank you, Alex and Don. And thank you for joining us on Across the Fence. I'm Fran Stoddard.